I'm SlingFin Tim, and today I'm going to break down the gear I use on the Tour Divide. If you're unfamiliar with the Tour Divide, it's a roughly 2,700 mile self-supported bikepacking race that follows the Continental Divide from Banff, Alberta to the US-Mexico border in Antelope Wells, New Mexico. In the context of ultra-endurance bikepack racing, self-supported means you're allowed to use any commercially available services like restaurants or grocery stores or even hotels, but you can't receive outside assistance or prearranged help from other people. Most of the route is quite remote and you don't pass a lot of gear shops, so it's pretty important to start with a dialed kit that will work for the huge range of climate and environmental conditions that you'll encounter over the course of the 2,700 mile race. This year we got just about every type of weather imaginable, from snow the first week to 100+ degree heat the last week to thunderstorms, I don't know how many days. So when you're building up your kit, it's important to remember that this is a very big country and you're going to get just about every kind of weather that exists between the start and the finish. Keep in mind, this is just the gear that worked for me. Your gear is going to depend a lot on your personal goals and what you prioritize as a rider. This setup was pretty much dialed for what I wanted. My goal was to do it in under 25 days. I ended up doing it in a little less than 20, but I knew I wasn't going to be riding fast enough to stay at motels every night, so I wanted to prioritize being comfortable when I was camping. I'll start with the bike itself. This is a Y-Cycles, now a Revel R+. I think it is a little bit on the roadier, racier side than would be ideal for the Tour Divide, but this is the bike I had and it worked out great. It was fast on the smooth sections and held its own just fine on the technical sections. Maybe not optimal, but also, you know, I finished, so that's good. I ran a 650B Hunt wheel set with a Sun Dynamo with 55mm Rene Hertz or Rene Hertz tires for the linguistic sticklers out there. These are the Tandem Ridge. These are the Endurance Plus casing. I didn't get a single flat, so not much to complain about here. Most of the components on the bike are stock. It's a SRAM Rival mechanical build, 11 speed. I did throw on a 28-tooth wolf tooth chainring, which I thought was great. A lot of people like to ride 30s or 32s. Personally, I'm a spin it to win it kind of guy. Personal preference, that's just me, but worked out great. I put on a 9-46 E13 cassette, which is the biggest cassette you can put on this drivetrain without modifying anything like the derailleur. I used a pair of power meter pedals on the Divide. Personally, I really liked having a power meter. I can get a little over-exuberant at times and burn myself out. Having a power meter let me make sure I was riding a sustainable pace. I started the race with a rigid carbon seat post. My butt was getting just demolished. I cracked in Montana and I ordered this Redshift suspension seat post to a bike shop in Steamboat. I would definitely use this again. It saves your back, it saves your butt, it saves your legs. Big fan. Not a shill, just a big fan. I had a set of aero bars with 70mm risers. I don't know if I saw anyone without them. I spent more time in the aero bars, I think, than any other hand position on the bike. I threw some of these big old fatty wolf tooth foam grips on the end for vibration damping, and that was great. My head unit was a Garmin Edge 540 Solar. Some people bring multiple head units in case they lose one, but I work at SlingFin. You know, I'm not making North Face money, so I just tied it with a little cord to the mount so it wouldn't fall off, and it didn't. There you go, problem solved. This is a Sinewave Beacon 2. It's great. Dave at Sinewave makes really good stuff. Comes in snazzy color matched purple if you want. Works great, highly recommend it. I use these 34-ounce water bottles from Trek. They're nice and big. I like being hydrated. I very ambitiously decided to sew all of my own bags for this trip, which I did out of Challenge Ultra 800. It's great fabric, super durable, probably overkill for this, but you know, I didn't want my bags to fail and they didn't. My bags consisted of a frame bag, a top tube bag, a little feed bag, 2 side dry bags on this tumbleweed T-rack, and then 1 big dry bag up top for my camp stuff. The top 2 bag I pretty much only used for food that I wanted access to during the day. I would replenish it with more food from my frame bag when I stopped. I also sewed a little cord port here so I could charge my battery pack off of my dynamo and store the battery pack in here while I was riding. In my frame bag, I kept the gear that I didn't need a lot while I was riding, but mostly used in camp or when I was stopped. So let's see, we got some chain lube. I used Dumontech, it was great. A rag, which is now very dirty. I lube my chain once a day at a minimum. If it was muddy or wet, I would use it a couple times a day. Had a little ditty sack for my small stuff, gear repair tape, spork, sewing kit, spare set of headphones. You know, not much to say about that. I have this little zip tie lock thing. It's stainless steel on the inside. It's not going to stop anyone who's determined to steal my bike, but it gave me a little more peace of mind when I was in a grocery store. Poop kit. Bag for my electronics and passport. I use the Thru Hiker Classic Nightcore 10,000 milliamp hour battery. A little med kit. I use this mostly for ibuprofen and, pro tip, Vagisil. This stuff is the only thing I found that actually cures chafe once it starts. Put this on, 5 minutes later, pain-free. It's like magic. It'll change your life. Not sponsored, just a big fan. I use my Canuck bladder and Platypus quick draw filter. Mostly I use this in the southern part of the route where the water sources were a little more questionable. Otherwise I just use bleach. Finally, I had this old stuff sack. I call this my mouth bag. It's a bag of things that go in my mouth. I have my toothpaste in here, toothbrush, floss, and earplugs. I didn't put the earplugs in my mouth, but my ears are close enough to my mouth that it seemed right. The dry bag on the drive side of the bike is a little easier to get to when the bike is leaning against stuff or when you set it down. So I kept all of my layers in here that I wanted to have access to over the course of the day. So mostly this is warm stuff, rain stuff, that kind of thing. Synthetic puffy, this is an Arc'teryx Nuclei. Definitely recommend having at least 1 warm synthetic piece for the Divide. There's so much wet weather. It's definitely nice to have and to know that it'll still be warm if everything gets wet, which it often does. Spare socks, I brought 3 pairs of socks to start. 2 normal hiker weight Darn Toughs, and then 1 of the really beefy mountaineering socks. My feet get really, really cold and go numb all the time when I bike, so having a really warm pair of socks was great, and I recommend it. Buff, I use this a lot up north and for cold descents, around my face, and when it got really dusty. Leg warmers, I pretty much lived in these until Wyoming, and even after that I use them a lot. A lot easier than dealing with tights. Ooh yeah, gloves. These were awesome. These are Stone Glacier altimeter gloves. My hands get cold really easily, and I just don't like having cold hands. I was really stoked on these, especially because they're modular and they've got these liners. I ended up sending home the liners in Steamboat Springs when things warmed up, but I kept the shells all the way to Mexico. Definitely would bring again. I have cold hands, your mileage may vary. Finally, I had my very stylish vapor barrier socks, which I sewed myself from some of our 70D Sil nylon fly sheet fabric. They're inspired by the old bread bag hiker trick where you put plastic bread bags on your feet, over your socks, under your shoes. I wore these pretty much every day through Montana. And that's everything that was in this bag. This big rear dry bag is a little bit harder to get to while I'm on the bike, so in here I mostly kept all the stuff that I only use when I'm in camp. We have this pair of Bora Gear down pants. I love these. They weigh like 6 ounces. They're so warm. I slept in these every night for the first week or so. Those are complemented by Feathered Friends Helios vest, also super warm, great warmth to weight ratio. These I pretty much only slept in, and I mailed these home when I got to Steamboat when things started to warm up. I run super, super cold. A lot of people got away with a lot less insulation than this. I was toasty and comfortable the whole time. And for morale, at least my morale, being warm and cozy is very important. And then my in-camp base layers, these are Brynja from Norway. These are these fancy fishnet base layers, and I freaking love these. Man, these are great. Absolutely the best warmth to weight ratio I've ever encountered in a base layer. So breathable, shockingly warm, really comfortable. Slept in these every night. The fishnettiness might put some people off, but you know, look good, feel good, I say. And finally, my sleeping bag. This is a Western Mountaineering Astrolite quilt. It's a 26 degree. I'm a big Western Mountaineering fanboy. This was great. It was very comfortable. Would bring again. I recently got converted to foam pad life on the Hayduke Trail. It's just so easy. You don't have to worry about popping it. You don't have to blow it up at night. At the end of the day, I had like 2 brain cells left, and the idea of inflating a blow-up pad was just, I couldn't deal with it. On this side, I have my tent system. So this is the cinder cone. This is our pyramid tent, and it was awesome. This dry bag has the tent itself. It has the collapsible carbon pole for the tent. It has all the stakes, all the guy lines, and a little ground sheet that I slept on because it's a floorless tent. I loved using this tent. Maybe it's a little bit excessive, but there's room for me and my gear and my bike. I could pack my bike on the inside when it was raining so I could keep my gear dry. I could hang up my clothes inside for them to dry while I was sleeping. I was just really comfortable. It's super stable in wind, which is great for exposed campsites and when we got caught in thunderstorms a lot. It's like 2 pounds with the pole, you know, maybe 2.5 if you bring all of the stakes and all the guy lines. Yeah, you know, I could have gone lighter, but every time I set this thing up, I felt like such a baller. Under my down tube, I had my bike tools. I kept these on with the belay strap, and this is the King Cage Many Things cage. It never bounced around, it never fell off. It worked. In my tool bag, I had kind of the standard stuff. I had a bunch of zip ties, spare batteries for my power meter, spare bolts, spare derailleur hanger, spare brake pads. I went through 2 sets. I guess 4 sets of brake pads. 2 on the front, 2 on, anyway. Bring extra brake pads. Spare valves, valve cores, super glue, spare set of cleats, quick link tool, spare sealant, tire lever, spare tube, patch kit, curved needle for sewing up my sidewalls, extra T25. I brought this little pump from Lezyne. I didn't really have to use it on this trip, so that's nice. And that's my repair kit. In my feed bag, I kept little bits and bobs that I wanted easy access to while I was on the bike. So we have a sleeve for my sunglasses when I wanted to take them off, a beanie, I had my InReach in here, multi-tool, a little bottle of bleach for water, a set of headphones, and a little multi-tool knife thing. This is the Leatherman Squirt PS4. They don't make it anymore, which is a real shame because it's perfect for biking. At one point, I thought I lost this on the Divide, and I was heartbroken until it resurfaced in my peanut butter. It had sunk all the way to the bottom. I was scooping a big scoop of peanut butter, and I hit something in my peanut butter jar, and it was my knife. I don't know how it ended up there, but I was happy to find it again. On the bike, I had full finger gloves, my trusty Patagonia sun hoodie. My base layer was this Brynja merino tank top, Velocio cargo bibs, They were great. I only brought one pair, which I realize is a controversial choice, but it worked out for me. I had some Julbo photochromic sunglasses, and on my back I had this awesome Nashville Packs Tempo. This is the new version with Alula. I love the straps. They've got a lot of pockets. I kept my headlamp in this one. I kept my sunscreen stick in this one. I keep trash in here, headphones, my buff, food, wallet, whatever. Really nice to have. Inside, I had a 3-liter water bladder. That was nice to have for auxiliary storage. I usually didn't fill it up. I only filled it a couple times in the basin and New Mexico, southern Colorado. I also use the backpack for food overflow. I had my rain pants in here. These are Gore-Wear bike-specific ones. My rain jacket, which is Gore Shake Dry. I also had my fleece. This is an Alpha Direct fleece from MacPack. I added a little zipper, a half zip to it, so I could put it on without taking my helmet off. I love Alpha Direct. It's a great material for this kind of application. It breathes really well and it doesn't get sweaty, but it's got a great warmth to weight ratio. I sent home some of my warmer clothes that I didn't need anymore once I got to Steamboat Springs, and I migrated these layers into here and here to get a little bit of the weight off of my back. And that's what was in my backpack. And that is the gear I carried with me on the Tour Divide. I'm going to link an itemized gear list in the description below in case you want a little bit more detail. For my goals and the experience I wanted to have, I think I kind of nailed it. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to talk about bikes, or you want to talk about tents, or other stuff, I guess, you can get in touch with us at slingfin.com.